Okay, we are recording for chapter 4 of The Password's Courage, which is not a very long chapter. Neither was chapter 3, but this one felt shorter. Okay, so it starts with the next day, the morning of the day when the two Messerschmitt people are going to come in to learn about, to inspect the documents, the drawings first, of the supposed British bomb site. Which it is worth noting, and I think it likely was done every day. The roll call or parade, it's referred to as a parade in this, of the prisoners. So every morning the prisoners have to come out, line up, and by the way, come out is not always voluntary. It can be at the point of a bayonet. It does make a point of there. So they are brought out so the guards can count them. Invariably, they count wrong, so they will have to recount. Even if they get the right number, they'll still recount. They doubt it. This morning, though, was particularly bad. It said counted 4 times until they realized that one of the POWs was in the latrine, passed out. Not sure of the explanation there. None was given, just that's where he was, and that was throwing off the count. Now, 2 things end up happening that are important after this. One is when Coward goes to the captain's office, or rather the outer office, because the 2 Messerschmitt guys are in there. But also, a group of Polish soldiers, Polish POWs, wanted to try to escape. And Coward actually went and like, today might be a bad day for that, because they're already on edge because the whole missing man for a while. They're like, no. It'll be fine. They'll never expect it today. So yes, we're still going today. It's like, okay. We'll do our part, but don't think it's a bad idea. So now we get to Captain's office, and he's there. The captain is in there. The other officer who I had mentioned before, the one who actually made the deal with him, he's in there, and the 2 Messerschmitts, which are 2 German civilians, 2 Messerschmitt employees. They are in there, and after a while, they finally ask him in. And immediately they are furious with him because the 2 Messerschmitt guys, they would be like actual engineers. They look at these drawings and they know this is nothing. He has been tricking you, and this has been going on for at least a week. So everyone is pissed at him. And there's 2 Messerschmitt guys, as I've already said, one older, one younger. The older guy actually, he's wearing a monocle, which is just like perfect. Just explodes at him in German, which is like, I got no idea what you're saying. So he's just saying they're taking all this, like, yeah. Eventually they leave, very, very angry with him, and promising he doesn't back down on this, by the way, and this is important. He does not back down. He doesn't acknowledge that he lied or anything like that. No, I mean, it's all there. I told you I couldn't draw. Which is good, because if he were to admit anything, he'd get in a lot more trouble, probably. I mean, they know he lied, but it's like you don't necessarily want to confirm it. He stays committed to the bit. And there's a promise of this being investigated, them getting to the bottom of it, and yes, he will be punished. What that punishment is not explained. Because after this, and it's like everybody leaves but the captain, he's like, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I need you here at noon, I think it was. Doesn't really matter. He's like, okay, I'll try. What do you mean try? Well, just I have some welfare duties I have to take care of, so I'll do my best, but it might be a little bit after. Just go. Gets out of there fast. Apparently that welfare thing was to help the Polish soldiers. They were trying to escape, because he ends up going by the fence, which it does mention there's a guard walking the inner fence. So, and if you see The Great Escape, it's very clear there are the 2 fence lines. You do also see that in Stalag 17, a little bit in Hogan's Heroes, but it's not super relevant in Hogan's Heroes because they just lift it up to get through. But he's very glad to see this specific Austrian guard there, because he understands some English, and basically, yes, you can't talk with him. So he is talking with him. First, offers a cigarette. And then, just as the balls on this guy, what is it that he's trying to distract the guard with? He's like, yes, I'm a sergeant major. Do you think you could be a sergeant major? 9. Well, no. There's a way. Here, I'll give you information. And he starts, in part through sign language, describing the bomb site again. It's like, oh my god. That is not what I would have picked, but I guess let's just stay consistent with the lie. And it works. And by the way, he's not the only one. There's people all up and down watching, so they can give a signal to the Polish soldiers to, if necessary, stop and come back. So you're not, like, the damage might be found with them trying to escape, but you don't want to be caught trying to escape. That's a bigger issue. But they did manage to get away. But when the noise starts of the hole in the fence being discovered, the guard's response is to immediately strike him with the butt of his rifle multiple times. Which it is interesting. It's like the first time it does discombobulate him, but it's the second time that actually puts him on the ground. And it continues for a bit. And this becomes a little relevant later. But just slightly. But then the guard finally runs off to respond to it. Coward is very dazed. He's stunned. He's not really sure what's going on. He manages to get himself over to a latrine to rest and hide, potentially also. Unfortunately, though, he is not alone. Because there is at least one Canadian POW there who believes that he has actually been turning over secrets. He is not, but doesn't matter. They think that, and they proceed to beat him as well, despite seeing that, oh, it looks like you've already been beaten. Well, here's some more from Canada. Yeah. By the way, the Canadians do come into play later as well. I'm not sure which chapter, but it might actually be the camp that Lambsdorff. It might actually be there. I'll explain that in a little bit, because the chapter ends with them arriving at this camp. It would be there. It's not at Auschwitz III. It's not there. It would be at this camp when the Canada has interesting history with World War II. Might be there that it comes up, and that is something we'll need to check on some research, do some research trying to make sure. But anyway, it then cuts from him being beaten unconscious, at least, which, I mean, he was already beat up, so it's not that hard, to him then being on a train being taken to Lambsdorff. They didn't know where yet, but he's on there. A bunch of other basically British POWs just being moved to this new camp via train. It does explain, though, a little bit that his last however many days he was in the cooler, so solitary confinement. Probably partly for having lied, but also because he was kind of involved in the break as well. But he was also brought out for the court-martial of the guard that beat him. Now, it's unclear if the court-martial was because he beat him, which, yes, that could in fact be a court-martial offense. But it could also be he was distracted. If he hadn't been distracted by Coward, in theory he would have caught the Polish guys trying to escape. But by the way, it does also state that that they were successful in their escape, at least partly, because the remaining Polish put together collected together a whole bunch of their medals and gave them to him to because of how much he helped. And to be clear, I absolutely believe that stuff happens, but I could also believe that was not just to him solely, but would have been everyone who helped. But anyhow, but definitely he's the one that got beat up trying to help, so it makes sense he would be the target for that. But anyway, so this is another one of those. It's not to the silliness of Hogan's Heroes, but man, the opening of The Great Escape, they get them to the camp, and immediately people are already making measurements to try escaping and actively trying to escape by jumping into the trucks that are carrying some tree limbs that have been cut off, trying to hide it. Now, obviously, The Great Escape is also based on true events. A lot of them were changed for various reasons. For example, the Americans in the movie are present throughout, but by the time of the escape, the Americans had actually already been transferred out of that camp. Regardless, these British POWs. Well, two things happen. One, train car doors. They're locked, except for one of them. There's one that wasn't locked. Now, they didn't try to escape because trying to escape from a train station, yeah, they're going to be caught. That's not going to do anything. But they can still open up the door. They lit, somehow, some straw on fire and threw it into a neighboring train as they left. And looking back, oh, look, the station's on fire. Isn't that wonderful? It gets better. So, obviously, you have guards on the train as well, including one guy who's all the way at the back. And he's like, for the whole train. He's back then, he's kind of being like, yeah. He's getting tired. He's looking around. He's looking in the back, and he's being very tempted to fall asleep as looking at, just seeing the nice symmetry of the rail lines, crap, I don't remember the name of them, but the ties, the railroad ties in between, and just seeing all that, and the occasional sliver of wood between them. Wait a minute, sliver of wood, what? Hits the air brake. They start checking. The Brits were taking apart one of the train cars. Like actually tearing up a hole with their bare hands out of the bottom, dropping the wood through. So that at some opportunity they could drop out and leave. The Germans do, in response to that, potentially one of the dumber things you could do, but at the same time, say, well, you gotta do something. They just, because this train car is sabotage, it's not safe anymore. So, they take them out and distribute them amongst the rest of the train, which means that now all the train cars are even more crowded. But it also now means that the entire train is being disassembled once the night falls, so they don't see the wood being dropped out. Now, it's not clear, nothing is said at this moment how many may have escaped, because once night fell, they could escape. Especially if the train was not going very fast, and does describe that at times it would spend hours stationary or just crawling along. Which during the day, absolutely there'd be guards on, up top or walking side by side, watching, make sure no one escapes. At night, though, it's probably going to be a bit harder to do that. So I could believe that some, but they don't indicate how many actually try to escape there. But it still is just they're tearing up the floor of the train cars. Because it's all wooden. They're just ripping it out by their bare hands, dropping it out. Yeah, sure, let's do that. As is said in The Great Escape, I don't remember the line perfectly, but basically, your responsibility when you are a POW is to escape and harass the enemy as much as possible. And that's exactly what they do. And it's yeah, and just, yeah. It does make you wonder what some people would do today if they were POWs like that. Because you'd think, well, yeah, if they're metal train cars, then that's going to be harder. I'm actually not sure how many train cars today are metal or are wood that you would use for hauling people like this. If it were metal, it would definitely be harder to get people out, but to break out the floor. But at the same time, I wonder if there would be anything like Geneva Convention wise saying no, you can't use metal train cars for moving people because the poor ventilation, it's too much at risk at killing somebody. Excuse me. But then that's also, will people abide by it? So, yeah. Yeah, don't worry. We will be getting to war crime stuff a little later. What more war crime? Have we already had some war crimes? I don't remember now, but we will get into it. But yeah, so it ends with, here, let me just... Okay. The men crowded forward, speculating wildly on where they were. Then someone caught sight of a signboard in the shadows, and to his mates spelt out the word that would remain with them to the end of their lives, Lambsdorff. Or Lambsdorff, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It is suggested that, well, they were at least going through the German flatlands, the plains, that also border on Poland, so we are getting towards Poland at least. I'm not sure if they would be in Poland yet or what, but in any case, it is interesting, the whole, yes, this is where, this is a place that they will never forget the name of, but his coward himself does end up in Auschwitz, so it's, I mean, not to, I guess it would just be like 2 names at minimum that would be remembered for the rest of their lives. But yeah, I don't remember I'm guessing that this is where the one war crime thing happens. I think it's where the Russian thing happens as well, which that's a little bit of a spoiler. I think I actually mentioned in the book introduction. So a quirk to the Geneva Convention, at least at the time, was you were only bound to it when with POWs from other nations that have signed it. So Germany had signed it, so had Britain. So they would have to abide by the Geneva Convention. Well, have to, obviously. It weren't perfect, but they didn't always try to, but they did. They were obligated to obey the Geneva Convention for Britain, for the British POWs. Not the Russians, though, because the Soviet Union hadn't signed the Geneva Convention, which meant that the Germans were free to treat them however they wished. Yeah. It does describe one episode that is... Yeah, it's an interesting thing. But, yeah. I think that since World War II, though, the Geneva Convention has been modified, or rather a new convention has been created that does make it a requirement that no, if you sign it, you have to obey it. It doesn't matter who the person is. It doesn't matter where the person is from. If it's a POW, you afford them these certain privileges and rights. So yeah, but that wasn't the time in World War II, so yeah, it gets a little interesting when we get to that. And I'm trying to remember what other things happen, but it doesn't really matter because I'll be reading it soon enough, and yeah, enjoying it. Well, and enjoying the story. Obviously, horrible part of history, but it still is. It's an interesting story, an enlightening story, and Coward did make it through and achieved some things that are mind-boggling. I mean, it's... Yeah. As I said, especially in the previous two videos, Hogan's Heroes is a bit less fantastic than you might have thought. It is still largely fantastic, but there are moments where it's like, oh, that's a little real. Alright. See you next time.